Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe, with episode 11 of my Crazy 5's. Oh, those crazy Italians. Let's spend a little bit here reminiscing about the good old days of VHS hunting, going to the video stores, and coming home with a pile of VHS tapes, man. A lot of times Italian film sprinkled into that mix. Had an incredible video store called Movie World that I used to go into all the time. Now, by now, of course, we're in the mid 80s, late 80s, or going into the later 80s. When I frequented this place, I would have already had 15 years or so of experiences of the drive-in circuit, film in general, the pages of Fangoria or Gore Zone. I would have just had so many running influences coming at me and being prepared for the first time when I started to really discover and be able to rent Italian films out of my video store. And we're going to go through those in a top 5 of sorts. I've got 2 outside looking in that I just want to spend a minute or two, but this video store, man, had that like a castle in the back. You walked up a couple steps into its cobwebs and everything, and then, you know, they had shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of just horror movies, man, and a small section of Italian cinema that seemed to be growing. And it's there that I started renting these things. They had a movie poster section, theatrical posters that you could buy for like $3.50 a pop. They made popcorn. As soon as you walked in, you smelled 2 things. You smelled, it's going to seem weird, but you smelled the plastic of the VHS cases and the popcorn. You grabbed your free bag of popcorn. You walked around. You found your movies. Maybe you gandered at the posters. Maybe you bought 1 or 2. For me, I was usually buying them. And making your way home and enjoying this. And some of these I'm going to talk about in my 5 were experienced initially on VHS format, watching it on my 25-inch console TV, usually laying on the floor of my living room, and sometimes in the middle of the night with all the lights off and whatnot. Sometimes with my mom, sometimes not. Sometimes, you know, really depends. But anyway, so Movie World was the place for me, and the pages of Fango was really a nice starting point that would start to tell me about some of these things. And you found other avenues of approach as well. That wonderful HBO book that would come once a month, right? I don't recall necessarily a lot of much Italian stuff on there, but I mean, you know, when you got to October time, usually Halloween would grace the cover of the HBO book or something like that. You know, sneaking a peek of Phantasm in the middle of the night, you know, kind of stuff, right? Usually HBO, I think, if I remember right. So anyways, Italian cinema and the influences and what really influenced me, and this is tough, man, because some of the Italian cinema today, I've come into later in my life as my collection has grown. But there were staples early on that when I first watched, it just ignited my imagination. And just, I mean, Italian cinema is not American cinema. I mean, you know, we had, you know, the horror boom of the 80s here. And, you know, and I have fond memories of seeing, you know, The Fog at the drive-in or seeing A Nightmare on Elm Street on the big screen or whatnot. But there was something about going to the video store and coming home with some of these tapes that finally arrived that you only read about in Fangoria or Gore Zone. So we're going to take a quick look at that. So here we go. The first 2 outside looking in. And I decided I had to go 2. I had to do. So the first one up here is Umberto Lenzi's Ghost House. This, of course, is the dub Scream Factory double feature with Witchery. And I have reviewed Ghost House more in depth on my Italy's Holocaust series. But anyways, this was one of those that I first saw, just, you know, whether it was the score, just the atmosphere, and I don't know what I would have thought about some of the humor in here. You know, the one character, the one kid who shows up at the house. But just the special effects sequences, you know, that poor kid down in the basement that falls into that white, you know, almost like the stuff or whatever. It's just that hot foamy stuff. And just I don't know, just the I've always been interested in shortwave radio, and so you kind of got that in the mix too. But I don't know if I would have recognized the fact that the house in question here was the same house they used in Lucio Fulci's house by the cemetery. But anyways, Ghost House, man. I think probably was the that doll and just the sound, man. The lullabies thing that you hear. It just, I don't know. It made a mark, man. It made a mark early on. The other one, and I hate putting this outside looking in, but this one came a little bit later. And the 5 in question are ones that I remember earlier on renting. Of course, this one came out in '87, and they're both released initially by Imperial Entertainment. Ghost House, first released by Imperial on VHS, Lindsay. The other one, though, came out in '87, actually 1 year earlier than Ghost House. So both of them have been later watches to what I'll show you. But that's stage right, of course, right? And here is my Imperial release VHS. Of course, this is one of the gems in my collection. Got this for about 10 bucks and change on Amazon. Could not believe it. This is exactly what I would rent it back in the day. But it would have been a white case, I'm sure, not a black case. This came from a place, I can't even remember now, out Midwest somewhere, a video store or something that was closing maybe. But I consider this, man, the greatest slasher ever. The first time I remember, I had the poster, the theatrical poster of this on my wall. Since been lost, unfortunately. But yeah, there is. I could sit here and talk endlessly just about this one. But this, even more than Halloween or American slashers, this one, man, maybe it was Boswell's score. I don't know, just the Italian flavor of it, just. Irving Wallace and just the whole trip to the psychiatric ward and just David Brandon's performance. I don't know, man. It just this just absolutely knocked me into tomorrow, man. This was something, man. All right, 5. Here we go. Top 5. Remember, chronological order based on year. In order to give it some semblance of an order, at least 2 I've had to utilize the US release year just so I could do an easy 5 down chronologically. Otherwise, it would have been a lot of them same years and stuff, or at least a couple. So anyways, here we go, man. Number 5. Remember, I'm not ordering them other than it's chronological when released. But these are the 5, man. As far as I can remember, these are the 5 that just blew me away earlier on coming into being influenced by Italian cinema. First one, man. First released by Star Maker Home Video. I don't recall that being a familiar name to me. But 1985, Lamberto Bava's, man. Produced by Dario Argento, of course. Demons, man. This is a nice, phenomenal Arrow release of this. I think Synapse did a 4K remastered, or maybe just a flat-out 4K release of this and its sequel. But again, man, something about the fantasy terror, the special effects, man, that went into this, man. I just remember, man, my mind was literally blown to pieces seeing this for the first time, renting this on VHS at some point in the game. This has always stuck with me, and its sequel too. Just unreal, man, unreal stuff, man. And number 5, Demons, man. Lamberto Bava. Number 4, a little bit of an interesting anecdote to go with this, but this was first released on by Vestron on VHS. Its U.S. release was 1983. Bruno Mattei's Hell of the Living Dead. And I have to tell you, man, this is a nice Blue Underground release of this. Earlier release, of course, DVD. I have to say, it is, in all of its wonderful cheesiness today, I have to tell you, as a kid, as a teenager, we view things a whole lot different than we do much later on in life. And there was just something about going with this this paramilitary or SWAT team, this military group, into the jungle, into this island jungle, looking for the source of this contagion that was seemingly turning people into zombies. Now, as a kid, man, you overlook a lot of things as a kid, man. You're just being blown away by, whether it's the score, the effects, just the atmosphere, the vibe of it. And I have really fond memories of this as a kid, watching this, just being mesmerized by, I guess, the adventure, the adventure of it, I guess, in terms of how you would view it as a young kid. Now, remember, I mean, I'm old enough. I remember growing up with Tarzan, the original Tarzan, and it just seems like in the old days, a lot of black and white jungle films, related jungle films and stuff. And so this would have been an interesting film for me to rent, man, and just be blown away by that. Now, how I look at it now, obviously, it's not quite the same as I did, but still, man, I mean, it's to my collection, and pretty sure I reviewed this in my Italy's Holocaust too. I may have. Bruno Mattei's, man, Hell of the Living Dead, number 3. This one, man, I'm pretty sure I first heard about this in Fangoria way back when. This was released on VHS by Media. Of course, we are talking U.S. release in '81. Joe D'Amato's, man, Anthropophagus. Again, this movie blew me away. I mean, just I've always had a thing for island horror, jungle horror, and this gets. One of the criticisms of this one, of course, is just the slowness of the pace at times, where seemingly not a lot is happening. And I don't know, those are the moments I seemingly more and more enjoy the most. It is so atmospheric, and the rainstorm that hits, just the idea that this island has been depopulated by this cannibal, this monstrous thing, and these poor kids that get sort of caught up. And even the tarot card reading on the way, when the girl just lets the cards fall into the water, just so the subtleness of some of these things, man. And then some of the, obviously, the notoriety it gets for a couple sequences that get it on. It's probably, I'm sure this was one that was on the Video Nasties list, which is funny because when you think about that list and you think about some of the films, it's a riot to think of what some of the films were. Now, I get it. There's one scene in question I sort of can see but not see. This film is really tame when you consider the nature of why people would have put those movies on a list like that. But this is definitely one of my favorite Italian films, even today still. I love watching this from time to time. And even its loosely connected follow-up, Absurd, which I wish D'Amato would have had the foresight to get that third piece in. His own version of a loosely connected trilogy would have been really cool. And, and have George Eastman as your main villain in all three. And he, of course, is the main villain in Absurd, right? But man, this was one of those, man, from back in the day. Number 2, this is my favorite horror film of all time. I would remember hearing the radio spots to this. Now, back in those days, man, as a kid, I'd probably listen to the radio as much as I watched TV, more so probably. When this was hitting the drive-in circuit of the day, unfortunately, I never got to see it in the drive-in. But I did hear the radio spots, and it lit up my imagination. Eventually, I would get to rent it on VHS tape. And Lucio Fulci's, forgive me, masterpiece, City of the Living Dead. Cauldron just released this on 4K in all of its absolute majestic beauty. This movie, man, is got to be one of the greatest films ever. Part of a loosely connected trilogy, the Gates of Hell trilogy, or some call it Fulci's Lovecraft trilogy. Fulci probably has hit cinematically Lovecraft in a way that no one has ever really quite hit, I think. We've got moments of Lovecraft in cinema, and generally those moments, though, aren't usually attached with Lovecraft's blah, blah, blah title. It's usually things like The Thing or Alien, or things that have Lovecraftian themes running through. Although Richard Stanley's Color Out of Space is a pretty darn good cinematic adaptation. But Fulci's City of the Living Dead, man. This thing, I'm telling you, man. Again, I visited the cemetery in Midway, Georgia, where much of the intro beginning sequence is filmed. That's actually, that video is down deep in my archive on my channel. If you want to take a look at that cemetery, and me and Sam actually visited that. God, I mean, again, I could go on and on and on and on and on and on. This is, for me, in terms of horror, it gets no better. It gets no better than this. And Arrow put out an absolutely fantastic edition of this just a year or two ago, which I had pre-ordered and got, and came with a nice book and everything. And then, of course, I think I got the regular Blue Underground. So the only thing I'm missing with this one is the original VHS release, which would have been Paragon. If I can ever get that in my collection, man, that'd be pretty sweet. And number one comes with a great story, man. Comes with a great story as well. First released by Magnum on VHS. I would have rented this. This was this had to have been the very beginning of my discovery of Italian cinema. I remember bringing this home on VHS, watching it in all of its letterboxed beauty. Remember, at first it was letterboxed, then it sort of evolved into widescreen, and it sort of became a staple of how we watch movies home. But letterboxd was new, and you had a lot of the black length up top and on the bottom, and it was tight. It was tight. And I remember laying on the floor in my living room watching this, man, and just my imagination, my mind just got blown. Again, I can't say enough about some of these films and what they did to a very influential teenage kid. But this is the 4K released by Synopse. We are, of course, talking perhaps his masterpiece of fantasy terror, Dario Argento's Suspira for 1977. An absolutely amazing film. Some of the sequences in there just absolutely lit me up. Maybe the one I remember the most for some reason, I remember trying to think as a kid now watching this on TV, the Goblin score, the girl running through the woods in the beginning, and just the girl who falls into the room, or the floor full of razor wire. These sequences were, I mean, you weren't getting those, in American cinema. Probably, dare I say, until, well, I shouldn't say that completely. Phantasm, you had some really cool Nightmare Logic, fantasy type stuff going on. And then you had, of course, the continuation of that and the sequel. But I was thinking Nightmare on Elm Street in '84. Nightmare Logic was finding its way into American cinema, but it was really prevalent in Italian cinema, and no better than this. Just the Goblin score, the Goblin. The score alone is got to be the single best. It's tough, man. I'll take City of the Living Dead over Suspira, but I probably take Goblin's score of Suspira over Frizzy's. I don't know, man, because Frizzy's score is so great at that too. They're both incredible scores, but there's something about this Goblin score that is just, it's terror-ridden, man. It just provokes things that just few films know how to do. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just, wow. Suspira. So, just a little glimpse into the early Italian cinema that influenced me as a kid. Growing up now, I've got a small Italian collection on my shelf, probably just over 100 films that are just Italian. But you got Suspira, of course, Fulci's City of the Living Dead, D'Amato's Anthropophagus, Mattei's Hell of the Living Dead, Lamberto Bava's Demons, of course, Outside Looking In, Michele Soavi's Stage Fright, and of course, Umberto Lenzi's Ghost House. Yeah, Italian cinema, man. Those were the days, and they continue to be the days. Thankfully, boutique labels, companies continue to release stuff and release it high quality versions of these things, packaging, and so it's it's nice. It's really nice. Somebody just told me the Houses of Doom, the two from Fulci, two from Lenzi, I think, made for TV. I think Cauldron may be releasing a box set of those 4 films. That's interesting. Anyhow, Italian cinema, man. Early influences. Oh, those crazy Italians. I don't know. It's one of my favorite niches in film. It continues to be. As always, thank you for the view. Thank you for the comment, perhaps. Sub if you haven't subbed. Appreciate it. Always helps. And as always, we end these things off with Go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream. We might be useful to you.